Cosmic Fairy here. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. And for those of you that have watched some of my previous videos, you'll notice I'm in a different place now. I'm very lucky to be living on a beautiful ranch just outside of Puerto Vallarta in Mexico. I'm going to pan the camera around now so you can see a little bit of where I am. Okay, so here we can see the pond, which is the view that I'm just facing right now. And if we move around, we can see some of the gardens here. And out to the other side, some of my potted plants. I feel very grateful and lucky to be living in such a beautiful place. And for those of you living in Puerto Vallarta, I will be taking on more in-person clients. Please check out my website for special locals rates. Moving on, today I would like to talk about entities. In working with my clients, I have removed many entities from people's auras, and they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and they really do vary in degree as to how much effect they actually have on each person. Now, most people do have some form of entity attachment unless they've been engaged in meditation or personal etheric clearing work. So there's a couple of different classes of entities. Some are fairly simple creatures. They've been created essentially from people's own thought forms. Now, they're usually created when a person has a strong, unfulfilled desire for a circumstance, event, or a thing to manifest. And this is generally when a person feels in a state of lack surrounding this event or circumstance. And this lack energy fills the void and it gets stuck within the person. And really what happens is that if the desire and the lack are felt over a long enough period of time, the energy itself will develop its own consciousness. And once it has this, it's going to have a vested interest in keeping this person locked into that state of lack around this particular thing. And I mean, we've all heard about the law of attraction. So when we are focused in the state of lack, it really is going to block us from experiencing other good things in our lives. Now, these kind of entities are very simple to remove. It really just requires bringing in source light, and then it requires the person receiving the energetic clearing to really practice gratitude. And that's going to help shift the energy from lack going forward. This is really going to mean that the thought form is cleared and the entity is gone. And also, because you're replacing the lack with gratitude, it's going to help bring in more positive energy and positive experiences into the patient's life. So the other class of entities are parasitic, and they come from different dimensions. Now, these entities are conscious and they seek to control the behavior of their hosts for their own benefit. So there's a broad range of these kinds of parasites. Some of them are quite simple. They're just seeking food. And others are really quite complex, and they have a complex agenda to keep humanity in general from our own sovereignty and really keep us locked in a base consciousness. So all these types of entities are looking to extract loosh from the host. Loosh is the term that is given to energy that is produced from suffering. And this is essentially food for these parasites. So you can easily see that if you have a light body that is full of these parasites, it's going to have a really negative impact on your mind, body, and spirit. Many of these entities operate by mimicking our own thoughts, so they can inject their thoughts onto the host's consciousness. So most people are just totally unaware that all of their thoughts are not, in fact, their own. Often these thought forms come in the pattern of addiction cycles. So they keep us engaged in compulsive negative behavior. So, some classic examples of this would be alcoholism, gambling, eating unhealthy foods. But also they can keep us locked in negative thought patterns of low self-esteem. So it can be like that internal voice that is putting us down and just causing us to be afraid to live up to our own potential. Now, that isn't to say that all negative thoughts and behaviors people experience are caused by entities. Some are from trauma and ancestral propensities towards certain traits. Some can really be from programming from the media. But if we want to really examine whether somebody has a parasite or an entity, what we're going to be looking for is if there's a real compulsion to behave in a certain way. Rationally, the person doesn't want to exhibit this compulsive behavior anymore. They know it's not good for them, and they really have the will and want to stop, but they just seem to be helpless. Eliminating these parasites from a person's aura is pretty straightforward. It's basically very much the same as with the thought form entities. We just use source light to create an unattractive environment for them to be in, and then they will move on. But what is harder is keeping the entities outside of someone's aura, because generally the reason that they are there in the first place is there is a hole, a tear, a slit, or a weakness in a person's aura that makes it attractive for them to move in. So another thing to point out about entities is that we have agreed to their presence to be there. Now, whether that is conscious or unconscious, we must essentially undo this contract in order to ensure that the entities don't just come back into our field. Okay, first, I'm going to explain how people get holes and weaknesses in their auras. Now, this usually happens through some kind of trauma, and this doesn't even have to be from this lifetime. It can be multi-generational. We do actually inherit certain weaknesses and tendencies down our ancestral line. And we can also damage our auras from just doing low vibe activities or hanging out with low vibe people. And also, in terms of like hanging out with low vibe people, entities do transfer from person to person. So that is something to think about too. Now, when we're talking about that, it all just forms like a negative feedback loop. And once we have a few entities, we look more attractive basically to other entities to be a host to them. Secondly, let's have a look at how we actually have to consent for an entity's presence to be in our etheric field. Now, this can range on one end from people practicing black magic and consciously having demonic entities attached to them in exchange for knowledge that is generally used to gain money and power. Now, I promise this is actually a thing, but it's not something I would recommend because it's the fast track to losing your free will over many lifetimes. And, you really just have to ask, is the juice worth the squeeze? And for me, it's definitely not. Okay, so on the other hand, we have entities that we've unconsciously agreed to contract with and attach to us. And this is really because we have agreed to certain rules of engagement before we came to this reality. And we've forgotten what those were. And this knowledge is not so readily available to most people. So in this way, we unconsciously consent. So the great thing about consent is that once we realize it is a thing and we are meditating and looking within our field to really detect whether there are entities in our system, we can make a conscious choice to not contract with the entities. And this is really, the first step to removing any entity from our system. If you suspect you have entities, I would, of course, recommend that you get an etheric clearing. But keeping your energy field clear requires commitment from you to making choices and taking action that are more in alignment with your higher self and with spirit or source, whatever you want to call it. So I can think of an analogy here, like if any of you have been smokers and you've had hypnotherapy for giving up smoking, it's pretty effective, but you have to want to give up smoking. If you don't really want to do it, then it just isn't going to work. So you need to make that personal commitment to change and to really, within your mind and within your spirit, remove that consent for the entity to be there. Even if you think it's perhaps, I know some people that have said to me that they feel entities are protecting them. And really, like, we don't need any protector in this world other than ourselves. Otherwise, that's just us giving our power away to something that is outside of ourselves. So when you have had an etheric clearing, and you've really made that commitment to removing entities from your aura, it's important to be just very mindful afterwards about the activities and the people, places that you are. And yeah, really just to be very mindful, and then really just engage in a practice of meditation. Meditation essentially bringing in source light energy into your system. Now, you can do this for literally 5 minutes a day, and it is going to have a big difference in keeping your energy clear. And it's really going to help you to become an unattractive host for entities. And meditating also is going to help you increase your power of discernment, because this is also another essential tool for knowing within yourself whether, when you're feeling a certain way or about to engage in a certain activity, that you're coming from a place of sovereignty. And if you're not, you know that there's something, whether it's an entity or whether it's something else, that is subverting you from your own best interests. And yeah, over time, you'll just get to really have a good awareness of what that is. Well, I hope I have shared some light on what entities are and how they can be removed. Entities in general have a great influence over many of the destructive aspects contained in this world. Therefore, I really believe that knowledge of them and also engaging in the removal of them is really key for us to create that edge that tips the scales in the balance of the positive in this world. If you feel ready to go on the journey of entity removal with me, please check out my website, cosmicfairy777.com, to book an appointment. If you like this video, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and namaste.